All right, the talk before lunch. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this talk on the Marketplace API. How many people here use the Marketplace API to look at stuff that is not just your app stuff, but like competitive analysis and stuff? Wow. So when I first joined the company a little over a year ago, I remember using the Marketplace API for the first time. I'm like, holy crap, we expose all this information. So for those that had your hands down, I think you're probably going to discover some pretty awesome stuff that Joe's going to talk about. So this is Joe Stack. He's from Lucid Chart. And I just asked him a question about and he wouldn't give me an exact number. I'm like, Lucid Chart seems pretty big. It's a few hundred people. And Atlassian ecosystem-wise, we're just a kind of tiny sliver of their business. But anyway, it's a very recognizable name. Joe, thanks for taking the time to come here. Please, everyone, welcome Joe Stack.
Thank you. Yeah, like you said, my name is Joe Stack. I'm from Lucid Chart, and I'm really excited to share with you how you can leverage the Marketplace API. So we only have 20 minutes, so we're going to dig into some practical examples, look at kind of a demo of how you can pull data in and use it to improve your business. So let's look at the basics of the API itself. Oh, and before we do that, let me outline what my goal is. So my goal is to enable you to be able to use the API. And as you're able to do this, you'll be able to, one, inform yourself about your app's performance in the marketplace, two, contextualize that performance where your app is competing, and three, evaluate the initiatives you're taking. So as you make changes to your add-on to make it better for your users, as you change your listing or change your strategy, you'll be able to see in the marketplace, was it effective? So let's start where the action happens, in the marketplace itself. And to do this, we're going to look at what information is available, and we're going to use an app, Tempo Timesheets, to kind of evaluate this. I don't actually know anything about Tempo Timesheets or the time tracking category, but looking at the data, this was a particularly interesting category and app to look at. So what can we learn from the marketplace? Well, we get things like total installs. There's 20,000 here. We can find out they rank very highly in the results for the category. They have many positive reviews and a 3-star rating. But that's a very small sliver of the picture, right? As an add-on vendor, you can get information like active installs over time from the vendor account page. But you can pull this information from the Marketplace API as well. Now let me ask you this question. Is this good growth for their category? Are they growing with the marketplace? How does it compare? Well, from the API, you can get that kind of information. You can get information about installs from other apps in the space. And this gives a lot more context and can help you see, are you growing with the marketplace or not? Now, this information is actually not super interesting because I only have it for 5 weeks. But as you do this over time, you can get a lot more insights. Total installs aren't the only thing, though. Here you can see Tempo Timesheets actually has less users than one of their competitors that had more installs. Maybe it's a strategic decision, or maybe this is an area to think about. Why do we have less? This is the kind of information you can pull from the marketplace. And there's a lot more that we'll dig into. So big picture, my goal is to help you get greater context of your app's position in the marketplace and greater clarity on how the things you're doing are impacting it. Okay, so let's look at some of the basics. This is the REST API. There's a lot of different things you can do. We're going to focus primarily on the add-ons category of data from the API. Now, it's important to note, when you access an endpoint, you can do so unauthenticated or authenticated. Things you can do as an authenticated consumer are updating your app, getting reviews, specifically adding reviews, changing your pricing, or viewing uninstall feedback if you have access to that. If you're unauthenticated, though, you can get some really interesting information with rankings and reviews. As we saw, those things are available in the marketplace, but they're really hard to quantify in a visual form. In fact, at Lucid Chart, we used to look at the marketplace, look at like trending, and we would find where do we show up, put it in a spreadsheet manually, and do this week over week. It was a pretty tedious process. So some of the benefits of using the marketplace, it's easy to consume. There's great documentation, which I highly recommend you go to. But there are some limitations. There's no historic data, so you have to maintain that yourself. Well, there's very limited historic data. And it doesn't contain everything the marketplace has, but it does contain most things. So let's look at a use case, rankings and searches. So consider this scenario. You've developed a great add-on, right? It meets a real need. It's a quality product, but you have a problem. You have poor discoverability. It's hard for people to find it in the marketplace. So your team has put together a plan. Part of this plan includes updating your listing. Last summit, there was a great talk on marketplace listings. I think this summit there may have been, or at Atlas Camp as well. You've worked on improving your SEO for your listing. Atlassian published an article about their search and rankings algorithms. And so you can look at those and make sure that your app's optimized for those. And you might be working with solution partners or other people to, other strategic partners to get your app out a little more. So you have a great plan in place, but it's important to evaluate if this plan is working. And this is where you can leverage the Marketplace API. So here's 2 indicators that we're gonna look at. We're gonna look at target searches. So if someone searches the word time in the marketplace, where does your app show up? Or we could look at trending. It's a valuable page to show up on, and it's a volatile one, so you can really make an impact on this by having lots of new installs each week. So let's look at how we can use the API, and we're gonna dig into an example. So you can consume the API in a lot of ways. You can use curl, you can use a scripting language. You could make a cloud application if you wanted and have this beautiful interface to pull all the info in. But you could also use something very simple, a spreadsheet. So we'll look at Google Sheets. If you use Google Sheets, you can make API requests to the marketplace, get a JSON response back, and then visualize that. So this is how you would do it. Inside of Google Sheets, you can go and open up the script editor from the tools dialog. This will take you into the script editor. Now this uses a language, Google Apps script language, which is essentially JavaScript, which many of you should be familiar with. It just has the ability to manipulate spreadsheets as well. You could also do something like this in Excel if that was your need, and you could use VBA. So in Google Scripts, you can fetch from a endpoint with the URL fetch app and use the fetch method. In this case, we'll pull information from the searches endpoint, one of those key indicators we were interested in. So let's see what that would look like in the marketplace. Well, if you search for the word time, you're gonna get a list of apps, and here the top 3 are Tempo timesheets, reports and gadgets, and time reports. Again, you can look at information on how these are calculated, and that's in the back of the slides. If you hit the Marketplace API with the endpoint on the left, you get a similar response. You have an add-ons array with all of the apps in the marketplace, and you can filter through those and find where your app shows up. Now remember, the marketplace doesn't have everything. You can see that this says /search or /brief. This actually only shows 10 results, and there's no way to get all search results in the marketplace. But with our goal of improving discoverability, if you're not in the top 10, you're probably not super discoverable. So this is good enough for our needs. Now that we know what information we're getting back, we can parse the JSON. We'll look through the add-ons, find where our key is, and then we'll add it to a sheet. And I have spreadsheets that you all can use at the end of the slides to download this and modify and tweak. So feel free to take pictures, but there's no need. Anyway, what we're gonna do though here is we're gonna take the date and the result and put it at the next empty row. Now to run our script from the Google Script Editor, you select the function, you run it, and if you did this 5 times each week, you could end up with results like this. Now this is a very, very simple example of how you can do this. But you could imagine tracking multiple add-ons, maybe ones that you're really interested in that are similar to your product. Maybe tracking different keywords and using different endpoints, which we'll dive into in a minute. We've gathered the data, so now something that we can do that's very powerful is set up a way to monitor this over time. In Google Sheets, in Google Script Editor, you can set up a trigger. And when you click the trigger button, you get a modal to set up events. You can select the function you want to run, which would be the script that we just created, have it be a time-driven event, and each week or each month, you can update your sheet. And now the final step, visualizing the data. It's important to make the data easy to understand, and a great way to do that is with visuals. In this case, a chart is sufficient. Okay, so we looked at searches. Now let's look at rankings. In this case, we're gonna look at the trending ranking. So when we go to the marketplace and we look at time tracking apps that are trending, we get a result. Here's an endpoint that you can hit to get trending information. You can get things like top rated, top grossing, and other subcategories of this. And again, it's very similar. We can find where our add-on shows up in this. This is exhaustive, it's paginated, so you can get all the information in this case. It's not limited to just 10. And this graph is a little more interesting. You can see that, in this case, Tempo Timesheets was the top trending app for 1 week. There was 2 weeks where they didn't even show up in the top 40, and then they were at the top again. It's a very volatile category, but you can imagine that assuming you apply sound statistic practices and don't make hasty conclusions, but make data-driven conclusions that are sound, an agile team could use this kind of dashboard to react quickly to changes in the marketplace and be aware of how competitors and they are moving to ensure that you get your product to your users, because that's the end goal. Okay, so we identified a problem, poor discoverability. We made a plan, and now we're leveraging the Marketplace API to track our progress and results on these indicators. We have a visual that's going to update week over week. You can use this to evaluate your efforts and also make sure that long-term you don't regress. Something that we do is we put this up on a screen in the office, which is a great way to just keep it fresh in your mind. Okay, so we've looked at one use case. Now let's look at a bunch, and let's look at them really, really quick. Okay, so we're going to start with the market share. Market share is a very valuable thing to know about. How much of the market do you have? And you can do this in a lot of different ways. The Marketplace API gives us some insight in a few categories with installs and users and downloads. So let's walk through how we might do this. You can get all the app keys in a category with the first endpoint shown. For each of those keys, you can get distribution information. This is information like total installs, total users, total downloads. You can calculate a percentage and end up with some simple visuals like this. You can see in this case, Tempo Timesheets, the app we've been following, has 36% of installs, or downloads, sorry. 32% of installs. They have a conversion of 2,753 downloads to 68 installs. Now, if you monitor this and look at this over time, maybe set strategic goals and targets that you're working towards, this can be very valuable to see if you're growing at the rate you want, and also are you growing with the marketplace, or is the market growing a little faster around you? All right, let's look at reviews. Now, I think reviews are a very interesting area. You could, if you wanted, do a bunch of fancy natural language processing on the reviews, though most of you probably don't have enough reviews, because most add-ons in the marketplace don't have a ton. But another area that you could look at that's really interesting is how do you respond to negative reviews? Negative reviews are going to happen, right? Products don't always meet expectations, and sometimes users are maybe misaligned on, or you and users are misaligned on what you're trying to accomplish. So what you could do is get all of the reviews for your app. For each of them, record the date, the ratings, the response, or rather whether or not you responded. And in this case, we'll look at recent reviews, which we'll quantify as within 90 days. Negative reviews, which are 2 or less stars, and then we'll put them into 2 bins. Did we respond to that user or not? And we can get a result here. In this case, there were 6 negative reviews in the last 90 days, one of which didn't have a response. And this is a good metric that's very actionable, right? You get emails from the marketplace when someone leaves a review, but that doesn't hold you accountable to respond. I saw someone shaking their head no. There is a way to link it up so you can get emails for negative reviews. So we could talk about that later if someone's interested. But yeah, in this case, you could set a goal to have 100% response rate. Now, just because you respond to someone's add-on doesn't mean it actually magically or someone's review, it doesn't mean it magically fixes your add-on, right? You have to address the issues, address the customer's concerns, and help them kind of rebuild that relationship. But this is a very actionable and easy metric that you can use to keep yourself on top of your listing and your product. Okay, now let's look at pricing. It's important to stay competitive. It's important that your product both has value for the consumer, but also that it's priced appropriately. And if there's a similar add-on in the space, you have to be priced in a way to compete with them. So one way we could do this is get all the apps in the category, again, like time tracking, Or maybe you want to be strategic here and target a few specific apps that you care about. For each of those, you can get the pricing from the second endpoint shown, store that price week over week or month over month, and compute some sort of diff. The response are just JSON, and they have the pricing at different tiers. Now, all the data up until this point was real. This is fake, but it shows an example of how you might output a diff. So for the month of July, App A's pricing changed at the 10 user tier from $12 to $10. App B's pricing changed from 10 to 8. Maybe you're competing directly with these apps, or maybe you do very similar functions, and it's important and valuable to know, hey, the price has changed. Do we still fit in? Something like this on a monthly basis, just to keep in your mind, is very valuable, so you can make sure you're competitive and make sure you can meet user needs and grow your business. Okay, the final rapid fire use case we're going to look at is recommendations. Recommendations, as they're called in the API, is the same thing as the similar apps bar. So when you go to an add-on, like Lucid Chart Diagrams on-prem, it shows, in this case on my screen, 7 suggested add-ons that you could install. This is valuable, right? If someone's looking for similar products, it's very important that they can find yours as well. It's users that might want your product. So let's look at how we can get this information. Again, you can get add-ons in your category, and for each of them, request their recommendations. Then you can look through that list of recommendations and see, where do you show up, or do you show up at all? In our example, we're going to look at, did we show up in the top 7? And we get a metric like this. Now, I actually looked for tempo timesheets, and when I looked, there weren't any responses. Or there weren't any, it was 0. So for timesheets, reports, and gadgets, when I looked, they showed up in 5 of 161 apps in their category. Now, this is kind of a hard metric to move, and maybe a more useful one would be, where do I show up in my direct equals, right? Products that are very similar, or products that I want people to find me from. When I actually reran this today, the spreadsheets that are linked in the back of the slides, I just have running continuously each week. Timesheets, reports, and gadgets shows up now in 16 of 148. So whether or not they did something to their listing or their product, or have improved their reviews, etc., or the algorithm that Atlassian uses changed, there's been an uptick, and that's valuable to know about. Okay, so we've gone through some use cases. We've shown very, very fast how you can get information into a spreadsheet, and I want to leave you with a challenge. And that challenge is to go yourself and leverage the Marketplace API. And to do this, I want you to do one thing specifically. Hit at least one endpoint that's relevant to you. Now, this could be something that's just in your category. This could be using your app key. And again, looking through the presentation, you can find some examples of things you could hit. Or you can use one of the spreadsheets here. The last 2 links here are spreadsheets that you can use. I've spent a bit of time updating, putting instructions and details exactly how it works, but you can go in and change values in the sheet or in the scripts to pull information that you would care about. So please go and try using the Marketplace API. I just want to say thank you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, or if you have ideas of how else you could use the Marketplace, and we might have some time for a couple questions.
Well, first, Joe, thank you so much. That was an awesome talk. Yeah. I think you might win the award for the best takeaways if those. I imagine those. Well, you probably download the deck, but
yeah, you can download them. They're Google Sheets docs. You'll get a copy and change them, use them. Just clear the data that's there if you want, and put your own stuff in. And please, like that's. I hope you do that.
Good question.
Just very quick, where do we find that slide?
I assume all these presentations are published, right, on the Atlas Camp schedule.
You know what? If you could maybe we'll work together. We'll Bitly these things and then throw them up on the app. We'll make sure you get them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we'll post that.
I know.
Good.
That was just an A/B test. He really doesn't have them. So now we know people want them. We have that stat.
Good.
Awesome. Now let's work on that other part.
Good.
Any questions, anyone? Yeah? Yes. Does anyone use it quite like this? No. Yeah, I figured there's probably very few. Okay, good deal. Yeah. Any questions? Oh, by the way, if you go to developer.atlassian.com, you'll find the /docs. You'll find the Marketplace API, and that also has like the Postman, or you can download the Swagger spec on it as well. So you can just import it into your tool and screw around with it.
Just requesting whether we can upload this quickly because it was so fast.
Yeah, I
we
know,
don't want to
I'm
wait
sorry.
too long until we reiterate all the points because it was very valuable. Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, it's lunchtime. Oh, we have one? No, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I was kind of interested. You said it's rather difficult to move the how many times my app shows up in the recommended application. How do you actually move it? It's difficult but possible.
Yeah, I asked in the developer community specifically that question, and there was no response. So I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that your title is probably very similar to searches. This is me just completely spitballing here. But if you read the article on rankings and searches, which helps you see how your search, it's also linked on that slide, which helps you see how you show up in searches. I think the criteria are somewhat similar. So like things like title are important, and then there's things in your description as well as like your rating and things like that that are tiebreakers.
I think you're onto something there, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Joe, very much. Yeah.